number of people. And not only that, the one point that it made out in your story was that these guys don't just come, they spend. You know, and that's the thing. Everybody else just fails in comparison.
You know, so and this stat never fails to get me that, you know, the China spring migration is the largest movement of people in the world. 3 billion trips, and that's not even counting people, in that period alone of Chinese New Year. So when you wrote the cover on a tourism this week, it's because you went for a conference in Singapore. I'm sure China must have been the theme of that conference.
Oh yeah. I think all ASEAN countries have seen a huge influx of China tourists coming in. They are single largest group of inbound tourists for at least 3 countries: Singapore, Thailand especially. I think 8.8 million Chinese tourists visited Thailand last year. And for the rest of the Southeast Asian countries, they are top 3. Definitely. I read some very interesting data coming out of China. They've seen a slowing pace of Chinese outbound tourists to about 3.4% year on year last year.
All right.
But the interesting thing is that the pace is slowing not because the Chinese are not traveling more, it's where they're going to. So the Chinese are really skipping the Greater China region, so Hong Kong and the Macaus, you know, and moving further away. So Southeast Asia and Japan and Korea have been a big beneficiary of Chinese tourists.
And because also, especially for the spring migration, the patterns, like you say, have changed, right? I heard they had to, I think it's either China Southern or China Airlines, biggest airline in the world, they had to double up on their flights to like Japan and all this because they were just all full because everybody's traveling out. But here's the question, right? In your cover, where does Malaysia sit in all of this? I mean, Chinese tourists are still the 3rd biggest group, but they're not the biggest group.
Yeah, for Malaysia, it's quite hard to beat the Singaporeans, you know, who can just kind of hop over the causeway and come over to Johor. But certainly after the Chinese and the Singaporeans and the Indonesians, the Chinese tourists are quite a big force. Last year, I think the number of Chinese tourists grew about 26%, which is quite staggering actually.
Exactly. Especially since
1.75 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Huge number of people. And not only that, the one point that they made out in your story was that these guys don't just come, they spend. You know, and that's the thing. Everybody else just pales in comparison.
The Chinese travelers do have a reputation for their willingness to consume, whether it's food, shopping. The stories of them shopping are quite legendary. But at the conference, the theme of it was that they wanted to promote a lot more intra-ASEAN travel, because apart from the Chinese tourists, intra-ASEAN is also a very important source of tourists for each of the countries. So you see countries like Myanmar are getting a lot of visitors from Thailand and Vietnam. You know, like we get a lot from Singapore and Indonesia and Brunei as well. You know,
so here's my ultimate question, right? And this is the impression I got. There's one of your side stories is what Malaysia's doing to actually attract tourists. Everybody knows Malaysia Truly Asia. You know, everywhere you go, the jingle stuck in your head. But what are we doing to sort of like get our piece of the pie?
I'll talk a bit about the numbers first. For the first 3 quarters of 2016, Malaysia's tourist arrivals did increase by a little bit, 4.4% to about 22.1 million tourists.
But we didn't meet targets, did we?
We didn't meet targets. But I do feel for them because the targets seem quite impossible to reach. Like, for example, the target for last year was 30.5 million arrivals. We're likely to close 2016 with about 26.75 million. And then this year's targets are like 31.8 million. On the sidelines, I did ask some of the tourism officials from Malaysia. I said, look, are these targets even realistic? And they kind of let out a sigh and they say, look, these targets are set by the NKRA because Malaysia has just announced this lofty target to have 36 million tourists and 118 billion in receipts by 2020. So because they're chasing the 2020 magic figure, all the yearly targets have to be inflated. Is it realistic? I don't think anybody will say it is.
Are we doing anything different? Are we selling ourselves well?
We're not. the interesting thing about the conference is that all the 10 ASEAN countries gave long press briefings about their performance, the strategies, and what trends they see. So when you have 10 countries presenting back to back, you really get a feel of, who knows what they're doing and who's just trying to, catch up. What really impressed me was the strategy laid out by Singapore and even Thailand. They've moved away, even Brunei, I would say, they've moved away from promoting destinations and attractions. They're promoting experiences now, which is very important.
Yes.
I think today's travelers are very discerning and demanding. They're no longer happy to say, okay, we'll get on a tour bus and we'll go and take pictures of this rock somewhere and then we had a good holiday.
Yeah.
You want to experience something. What is Malaysia selling? The same old. They're selling events. The golf events, SEA Games,
but they're
shopping.
not selling.
There's like 3 state tourism campaigns. Visit Perak, Pahang, and Terengganu years. Do you know about that?
No.
Yeah.
I know that tourism offices are closing.
They are.
That I know.
They are. Tourism really thrives on 2 things. Visas, whether
Which we've
it's
already quite relaxed.
visa-free or visa on arrival, e-visas, and flights. You have to be able to bring them here. But the problem with Malaysia is we can bring them here, and then what? So I do believe that we are still somewhat behind in terms of the software of tourism. When tourists get here, the information, the support, the level of service. Look at how much our tourists love our taxis. That's
to the point where we had to legalize Uber and Grab. If you look at it at the surface, it ticks all the boxes. Beautiful, natural, whatever, but something's missing and we don't know what it is, right?
If you took a trip to like beautiful Terengganu or wherever, even as a Malaysian, you would find that it'll be quite difficult to get to all the attractions, get information on them, the parks. I just shudder to imagine how like foreign tourists would try to navigate themselves around these things. I think we tend to underestimate how important the software is. Generally in Malaysia, we don't really have a service mindset, which is why whenever we go to Japan, we'll come back and rave and say, oh my God,
they were so nice.
They were so nice, the service was great, everything works. I think we're going to have to really work on building our software before we can really talk about bringing in like droves of tourists.
For more on the stories, pick up a copy of The Edge Weekly at all good newsstands.